There we go.
I would like to, entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the May 19th, 2025 planning commission meeting, action meeting minutes.
They were emailed to you. And it should be, you should have some sitting.
I thought the actions that were handed out in our packet at the table was it, but it's not, so. Right there.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to approve the May 19th planning commission action meeting minutes.
Do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
I second.
Very good. Any discussion? No discussion, so ahead and vote. Sorry. Aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion passes, minutes are approved. Old and new business. Recommendation to council to approve. Corporate rule of mandatory FEMA floodplain regulation. So with that, we'll invite, is this our
This is
Daniel?
Dan Reader.
Dan Meter, I'm a longtime finance consultant, and Jamie Crawford, my associate for over a year now, will be here soon. She's on her way from
Oh, very
Florida.
good.
And I have to confess that Jamie has been doing most of the work on these, and I've been going to the meetings. We have 11 cities that we're working with to get this stuff done by the 31st of July. And she broke her foot about 6 weeks ago and has been housebound until just this last week. So she's been doing the work at home, and I've been going to the meetings and whatnot. But this is a little bit different than what we normally do. So I'm going to stall for just a little bit and let her get here, and I think she can explain it better than I. But if you aren't aware of it, this is a situation where the Federal Emergency Management Agency is absolutely demanding that you adopt this verbatim to what their program says. And failure to do so will get the city removed from the National Flood Insurance Program, NFIP, I think it is, and NFIP. And that's costly to the city in many ways, so we try to avoid that. I had an experience with the floodplain and floodplain management people 50 years ago. And I was just starting out. I was up in Ione in Morrow County, little farm town, about 350 people, and they needed a wastewater collection and treatment facility. And I was working for Tennyson at the time, and I talked him into going for a public facilities plan to do that kind of work. Got the grant to do that, wrote the plan with one of our engineers doing the engineering portions. And we were ready to go for a grant, and I had the grant packet in my hand and went out to a city council meeting that had been changed from the city council chambers to the school gym because the whole town came out. And a group from the Environmental Protection Agency at that time were down from Seattle, and they got up, and one guy got up and said, "Your whole town is in a floodplain. You'll never build another house in this town because you're in a floodplain." And then he crossed his arms and said, "We've been taken to court 56 times. We've never lost." And I was just appalled, and I was kind of young and stupid. And I did do much during the course of that meeting. There was a lot of questions asked. When we got done, I got the guy outside and I said, "You just killed this town. What are you doing?" And he literally did, because almost 50 years to the month, they are now building a sewer in Ione, a half a century later. I'm not kidding. And there have been houses built on the hills around the town, nothing down. And it's easier than that. You can use a floodplain ordinance now. It's a lot better than it used to be. The other I guess the other piece of this is there's a second piece that's in the courts, and maybe some of you know about it. It's the wildlife protection aspect of floodplain management. And that is going to be a real problem, I think, for most cities, for anybody who needs to, if that goes into effect, and it was a case brought by the National Marine Fisheries and Portland Audubon Society, and it's unique to Oregon. It's not, they're not doing it in Washington and other states, they're doing it in Oregon. And that was the original piece, and now there's another case brought by the Oregon coastal counties and a whole bunch of other groups that are trying to get it quashed. But the difference is this: the regular Oregon model floodplain development permit is about 9 pages, and it's real easy to do. The BIOP floodplain development permit is about 18 pages. And we've got a situation down in Culver, which is a little town south of Madras, about 9 miles, and there's not a body of water anywhere near Culver, not a creek, not a pond, anything. But when there's a thunderstorm, Culver sits in a little bowl, and the water just sheets off the hills and comes down through the town. Well, they're building a skateboard in their central park, and a piece of that floodplain touches one street in that park. And the city engineer called me and said, my God, we're in the floodplain. We're going to have to do the floodplain development permit for the skateboard park. What are we going to do? And I said, well, what's the problem? He said, well, the new rules, it'll be $20,000 worth of engineering work to get that done. And I said, well, those rules aren't adopted yet. Here's the old development permit, use that. And he looked at it and said, oh, I have it done tomorrow. So that's the difference. I mean, the new rules, if it goes into effect, will be very, very complicated. And it will be, I think, almost impossible unless you're willing to spend a ton of money to get anything done.
Well, Dan, I just to maybe help with your interest in sort of some saving some time waiting for Jamie to arrive. I understand that we are also interested in perhaps recognizing your service to the city. And I don't know if it's appropriate, perhaps we could pause or take a recess perhaps from the meeting to do that. This seems like a good time to maybe take that time.
Sure, I thought she'd be here, but heir apparent. To the planning function, and she is a computer whiz and a great researcher, and I really enjoyed working with her.
Yeah, and I had a lot of fun working with you. So, yeah,
You hear all the stories.
I do. and it gives good context, which is awesome. So are we jumping into the new business?
Yep, we're gonna let you just jump into the floodplain staff report summary.
Perfect. So, essentially, well, I guess I can kind of back up. So in 2009, Portland Audubon Society sued the federal government. And they basically said that the floodplain protections under FEMA were not enough to protect bird habitats. So they wanted to see like more robust kind of regulations along riparian corridors, and other places. So that goes through the courts. And basically, FEMA was directed in 2016 to update the floodplain regulations. And I'm sure maybe this has come to you guys since 2016. I feel like this has kind of teetered off and on for different communities where, you know, the state's pushing for one thing and then some communities wait and then they pull it back because of, you know, courts and everything. Now it's kind of come down to the wire that both the state and FEMA have given jurisdictions 3 different options. So one of the most simplest ones is just to prevent any sort of development within the floodplains. And that's fine for some communities, but it's not realistic for others, like Cascade Locks, where you guys have, you do have the marines, so like, they're really steep, not as impactful, but I mean, you're right next to the Columbia River, so the floodplain area is more expansive. Compared to some jurisdictions like, oh, was it? Culver?
Yeah.
No. Do they have any? Metolius, Stinking Fish, does not have any floodplain.
No, no,
Yeah.
yes.
So they're easy and just, okay, we won't do anything. The next option is both state and FEMA work together to update the model floodplain ordinance. And this ordinance is it's robust. But it covers everything that the state wants to see and how FEMA wants to sort of regulate things. And we've been working with FEMA representatives, and the way that they look to see if jurisdiction is following or like adopting the model ordinance is they literally look at it phrase by phrase and word by word, and it's very particular because it's been gone over by their lawyers, and so they want to make sure that it is near identical. There are some things that you can change, like that are related to the city, like obviously the city recorder or the city administrator, and who is your like floodplain administrator. But they've been putting a hammer down to see this exact language if the cities choose to adopt the model ordinance. And then the third option, which is kind of the most ridiculous one, is it's called the BIOP, which is a biological option. So basically the city allows development within the floodplains on a permit by permit basis, but any development needs to get an environmental scientist involved to write like a habitat assessment report. Use that through one of the FEMA like information things and kind of going over this, and you were just shocked. What was one estimate for like fees
I
or
already gave that one.
Okay.
20 grand for,
Yeah.
for a sidewalk.
which is not realistic for a lot of jurisdictions, for most all applicants. And so out of the three options that we're allowed to do that the state's asking us, we're suggesting that Cascade Locks just adopt the model ordinance language, but integrate it into your code. And so before you are code amendments, simply just bringing that model language in, removing your previous floodplain regulations, 8.6.120, and just kind of swapping them to make sure that we meet the model language word for word, but it still lives in your code and can be administered through your code, not necessarily a separate type. And then I've put we're suggesting that you put the definitions related specifically to floodplain instead of integrating them in with your other definitions, keeping them or creating another section so that they're pulled out. Because there may be additional court requirements, and I don't want to have them all tangled in for you guys, so it feels easier to just have those floodplain, have them have their own little section that you can just touch and not necessarily takes less time to go through the code and everything. And then I scanned through the rest of your code just to make sure that floodplain permitting won't interact adversely with some of your riparian regulations, right? So, because I love your goal 5, it's goal 5 protections around your creeks and your streams. That 75-foot setback is amazing. And this would still require people to get a floodplain permit in addition to also having those riparian protections. So those protections aren't going to change at all. So, and it's gonna be the same, so they've always had to, if there's development within the floodplain, you need a floodplain permit. Because you need to coordinate with DSL, like, if you're doing any work within there, the Corps needs to be involved, in some instances. Or there's, remove and fill permits and stuff, so. Oh, and then. These floodplain, even though it's unfortunate that they call them permits, they're not technically a land use permit. So, they are not a land use decision, they're what you call, and I'm surprised your code has this, which is awesome, they're an administrative action. So, if somebody were to appeal, their floodplain permit, it goes through circuit court and not necessarily MUBA because it's federally mandated and has its own sort of system. So, there are some provisions there's some clarifying language that I've put in here, under the city administrator in particular. To serve as the floodplain administrator, and then that is defined elsewhere. And then in Article 2 in procedures, making it clear that floodplain regulation and permitting is strictly under Chapter 120. And considered an administrative action. And that clarifying language is not super necessary. But Dan and I have run into some floodplain interesting, you've got stories.
Thank you.
Where just the word permit really confuses people
Yeah.
about like where that jurisdiction lies. So I think it's best to simply lay it out on that language.
I would counsel that after spending a year in Waupun, trying to explain to folks that the planning commission really is not responsible for the floodplain ordinance. It goes, if there is an appeal, it goes to the city council and then it goes to circuit court. It doesn't go to the land use board of appeals. And boy, it was just difficult because it was part of the planning, but in Waupun, it was part of the zoning ordinance. No, it wasn't separate, but the planning commission was the floodplain administrator. That was the problem.
Oh,
And so that's why we're making the city administrator, the floodplain administrator, and we're keeping the planning commission out. We're keeping it separate from your zoning ordinance. And it turns into a very emotional issue where sometimes soft or straight talking and logic has no business, doesn't do any good. It was a frightful year out there. We finally got it settled. Well, I think we did. We're still in LUBA.
yeah, no,
They're trying
Yeah.
to take it to LUBA, and they shouldn't hear it.
Okay,
No.
just to clarify, you're proposing to adopt this into our land use code,
into your lens, though. Yes.
acknowledging that the appeal component would go to circuit court as an administrative action and not an administrative decision.
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah, and so, a part of that language in here, you guys rule, you rule the code. But this gives that power to the city administrator and it's very clear on where that lies. And I actually have a horror story too at Island City where, there was a lot of, and I told actually, they elected to not have their floodplain ordinance within their zoning code. Only because they were getting a lot of pushback from this one developer saying, well, the state says that it's your regulation, and it's just like, oh my God, it's. The federal government that's making us do this too. I'm like, I can't just, have a magic wand and wave it and make it go away. Cause this is coming from somebody that is way larger than the city, so. It creates that distance and separation for you guys and less headache, I mean. Essentially, the stuff that comes before the planning commission, like you guys should have a hand in sort of deciding and creating those conditions. And it doesn't make any sense to bring something to you where it's either like, do they need it or do they don't? right?
Excellent, thank you. Are there any questions for land use? Council? That was a great description, great overview, very clear packet. The highlighted and straight through is a great, easy to read, it's a lovely format, thank you for presenting it that way.
I think I followed it through getting it to you guys.
Oh, no problem. Happy to provide another moment, I don't hear any questions though.
I have a couple of questions.
Okay,
Uh,
sure.
One was, and I know this, all these pages are numbered. But when you talked about, well, it's 4.2.3.1. And it's a community boundary alterations. So, and I talked about the annexing, if we annex any more land, but I wondered. For you, Kathy, we don't have any more land to annex, do we?
Well, we can
Smidgens.
on the
Oh,
west
that's right.
side.
Yeah,
I mean, not much, but there is some that we
There's-
could,
down to the west.
yes.
And
And,
it's in the bigger area, urban growth boundary, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, and that's, but east of here, everything's in the urban growth boundary, isn't it, or?
Yeah, east of here, there's
Right, so-
nothing we could do.
Yeah. What about Oxbow Hatchery? They're in the urban growth boundary.
Well, remember the National Scenic Area map and all that, I can't
Right.
remember what all
I
happened,
can't
but I'd have to look.
So I was picking your brain.
Yeah, I'd have to look, that was way a long time ago.
I think I know where you're going with this, in that, so the language that adopts and references the new mapping. Actually, it doesn't identify specific firm panels, it calls directly to the county-wide study and then says any applicable. And so
Okay, yeah,
if you have stuff in the urban growth boundary that comes in, then isn't covered on one of those panels, that other panel will come in and affect it.
okay.
Did I get it right?
I was just trying to think. What we might have to annex and.
Super limited.
I couldn't,
There's a couple of parcels.
yeah, not very much. We're all pretty much in. And I turned another page down, but I can't remember my question, I didn't have a pen to write it down, I think. I think it was about variances and. But I can't remember what my question was.
So for the. The way that they sort of develop the model code is. You basically show that you meet everything by making sure that. Development impacts aren't going to increase the base flood elevation. And that's pretty easily done by, engineering on site, stormwater management to make sure that your impacts are not leaving the site. But if for whatever reason, they can't do that and they do need a discharge, then there's this variance process that's pretty particular. And they will have to hire an environmental scientist and they will have to put together like a detailed engineering study. Why are you doing this? And showing good cause and sufficient cause. And so for this, it becomes, it really becomes on the backs of both your city engineer and their engineer to talk through how that looks. But I haven't had to in the 7 or 8 years that I've been a planner, I haven't dealt with this variance yet. Because it's pretty easy for new engineering technologies to take care of things on site. Have you had to deal with one of that very?
in 50 years, I've issued maybe 5 floodplain permits. After they figure out what it's, the applicants figure out what it's gonna cost them to, I'm gonna move it back from the brick road a ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
Yeah, once they see what it's gonna take. we have more people that the houses have been there for 90 years, way before there was floodplain management, and favorite example is out on 15 Mile Creek east of the Dells. Uh, the house had been there, so it wasn't even bothered by the 64 flood. And they were demanding that it get floodplain insurance, and we did an engineering study and determined it wasn't floodplain. And saved them some money. And I don't think we'll see anything worse than 64 flood, I hope. In I don't know whenever it was a long couple of weeks I spent throwing sandbags.
And I've had that too, like, they call them map amendments or clomers, or the definitions are in here. So I've had that a couple times where, somebody's, stopped up or like, basically somebody else has done something and now their property is outside of the floodplain. So, and it's from those historic stances where there was probably fill to like,
Sure.
get the house outside of the floodplain 100 years ago.
Might be showing my ignorance here, and I'm sure it is a little bit more explanatory on the map, but I see the designated zones, AOH, ARAO. What do those stand for?
They're just different levels of what is within and outside of the what they consider is in the 100-year floodplain, and those sort of different definitions. So I think AR is that it's riverine floodplain. So it's in those really steep valleys. And then I know D is if there's some sort of what is it called? What are the name of the things that broke that flooded New Orleans?
Levy.
Yeah, if
Levee,
it's
yeah.
protected by like a levee or a dam or something that's so where it would have been in the floodplain, but is not because of that. And all of those those are developed specifically for like insurance purposes. I think that's the whole reason for the mapping. And so there's, I'm sure, different categories for each one of those and the amount of risk that's associated with those. I could imagine like riverine flooding is probably like a flash flood that's gonna happen, that maybe has more force or push than something, like the Columbia River slowly rising, so.
So does the map? Does AMAP, I mean, it has all those different designations?
Yeah, you guys have about 5 panels, and I have included them, so if on the staff report, there's little PDFs that you can like click on and it'll pull up that panel. Yeah, there you go.
And I
So-
think the River County map site, I know for a while they actually had everything, because we've been going through this process since COVID. And I think they have all that stuff on the Hood River County map site that you can actually just go look at Cascade Lock specifically.
Like Jamie,
Yes.
Jamie said, there's really only like 4, so they would go to like A, B, C, and D, or like there's an 80 years like that. It'll tell you in the code what it references. So it's good.
And when they get the map developed, it'll all be on that map. It's not finalized yet.
Yeah, even though they're forcing us to adopt it.
Yeah.
So to the extent that this is being embedded into the land use code, but as you potentially stated, sort of package. Do you have any, predicting the future? Is it anticipated this will be something that continues to go through? I mean, at this point, it has to be adopted by July 1st or the 30th.
July 22nd.
22nd, okay. So we're doing this because they're saying we have to, but there's still, as I understand it, a lot of different lawsuits and appeals and different moving pieces to this, so we're just kind of going with it for the time being, and this is the best information we have. Is that your take on that?
Yes, and that's only because things were more certain literally a year ago.
Okay.
And then now with the question of existing even, So that's why there's some tentative up in the air. Can you speak to political will or?
Well, one is the second suit that I talked about earlier, brought by the Oregon, primarily by the Oregon coastal counties, which are getting killed by this.
Yep.
And the current administration wants to, dissolve FEMA and put floodplain management and all their activities and emergency services back in the state's hands, individual states. And just do away with FEMA. I don't know if that'll happen, but that I'm seeing, a lot more literature, a lot more being written about it. Right now, it's kind of interesting. We can't find a FEMA representative anywhere. They've disappeared.
We were working with two earlier and now they're just gone. So
We don't know where they are. They got pulled back or something. is what we
that
heard.
was the language.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're doing it for now.
That sounds great. Any other questions? No,
I just think we need to do this. Who knows if we'll have FEMA, who knows what our
Yeah,
government will look
yeah,
like in another.
under the current situation, you must adopt.
Yeah,
you should. With that, I'll entertain a motion to proceed with the recommendation to approve the mandatory FEMA floodplain regulations.
also move.
Motion, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second, any discussion? Hearing none, let's go to a vote. Go ahead, Sue.
Aye.
I,
Aye.
Chair votes aye, passes. Okay. With that, let's move on to the additional new business note of grants.
Yes.
Tell us more.
Okay, so, the state planning agency, the Department of Land Conservation and Development, so DLCD, in every 2-year cycles, they put a bunch of money in a pot. And then they distribute it through a technical assistance grant. And it's divided by regions. So, you guys are sort of oddly lumped into the Central Oregon region with like Bend, and I think it runs all the way down,
Cape Falls.
yeah, Cape Falls. So it's like this giant strip. And then Don Hurt has everything east of that. And then the other part of Oregon we don't care about, but it's all split up.
Those people.
Those ones. So they split it up, the money by region so that it's equitable, or that's the intent. And then the grants are, I don't know, Joanne, you're probably familiar with like the periodic reviews and stuff back in the day. Yeah.
Long time ago.
Yeah, so they got rid of those, and so now they're using these TA grants to sort of like bring us back to that, because they realized that jurisdictions didn't really have the funds or the capability or the time, honestly, that it takes to go through like code updates just to meet state laws. And there have been a lot of meddling in state law related housing specifically. And looking at your code, you have an expansive code that's very particular and I really like your code. I wasn't expecting this much of a robust code for the size of your community, but whoever has tweaked this and worked on it did a really good job. But there are things in here that I think one of the last amendments that I'm familiar with that has changed was in 2023. The state legislature, whatever, they are now requiring jurisdictions to allow what they call single residential occupancy units, which is literally they're bringing boarding houses back into existence. So somebody can rent out, a bedroom, and then they have shared bathroom and kitchen facilities. So back to the grant. I think there's not a lot. I think you guys have amendments and things to kind of work on in your code to bring it up to state statute, like. Specifically right now, one of the big ones for jurisdictions is, the. The size limits and the designs of manufactured homes and manufactured dwellings. So you can't have, a cap on how big a manufactured home is. Unless you also have a cap on a stick-built single-family home. So if somebody came to the city and they said, I wanna put in, you know, a 980 square foot. Manufactured home, the city legally, you have to allow them to do that. One thing that you guys do have in your code is you have. A set of design standards that apply to single family stick built and duplexes. And what we would do is just say, and also manufactured. And, you know, so they're not just plopping a container box down, or what's the community that hated barn dominiums?
But
Barn dominiums,
it has one that looks like a sore thumb,
yeah, the one that they hated it. Yes, yeah,
the Dallas,
okay, maybe it's, but,
with
so.
the band.
So it's little things like that that I feel like, you guys as the planning commission could serve, or whoever, you wish, just like a technical advisory committee. The grant cycle runs from 2026 until 2028, and it runs on the fiscal, so that, right now, they just opened it up, June 3rd. The grant closes August 4th. And then,
The application process.
or the application process, excuse me, yes. So the application process closes August 4th, and then we'll get notified, or whoever gets it. Around November, you know, October, November, for the work to officially begin in January. And we're actually just finishing up 2 grants, where we did a code update, really focusing on housing in Arlington. We had open houses, and I was surprised how innovative that community was and how accepting. They, yeah, they took out a lot of regulations, so. And they're gonna let the market decide on what sort of happens, but they have these design features, and so it's more of they're letting their zoning code, instead of being so prescriptive. They're regulating like bulk and scale, and so like where the buildings are and like how big they are, but not necessarily, you know, every single house needs to have a garage, or although they did do that for single family. Or one of the big things that the state's really about right now is middle housing. And a form that could be, and I have my first one I'm approving in Arlington, is technically it's a 2.5 acre lot. It's for the school district, and they have an existing manufactured home on it. And they wanted to put 2 more manufactured homes on it, but not necessarily divide it or do anything weird with it, for their teachers. And so, it's technically considered triplex development. And so I'm writing, an administrative decision. If they meet all of the regulatory standards, check them all off. You can go ahead and have, you know, these 3 manufactured homes on one lot. State law defines a manufactured home park as 4 or more manufactured homes. So I saw you kind of squint and you were like, yeah. So there are provisions to prevent that, like, you know, somebody just buying like 1979, you know, old guys and plopping them down. But yeah, the homes that the school is going to put in, they're really cute. And I'm happy for them, and they're really stoked to provide that housing for their teachers.
What's the base zoning of that parcel?
It's R2.
Oh.
So the way that they've scaled it in R2, you can have a single family home on a 5,000 square foot lot. But if you wanted to do a duplex, a triplex, or a fourplex, you have to have at least 10,000 square feet. And you have to be able to meet all the parking requirements, all the setbacks, the height. There needs to be design standards. And then on top of that, there's a landscaping minimum for triplexes and fourplexes, so that you're just not flopping down on dirt. Yeah, so they've got some things to guide that. They don't have building coverage,
Lot coverage.
or lot coverage, yeah, but. And I can't remember if you guys do, but that could be another
Yes.
way to,
We do.
yes, yeah. So that could be another way to make sure that bulk and scale are accounted for when you're putting multiple units on one thing. One of the things that Arlington didn't do, but then another individual at the hearing wanted, was cottage clusters. So have you guys heard of that? Yeah. All right. Really cool concept, cottage clusters development. It's like shared parking and then individual homes, between like, I think it's 4 to 6 or 4 to 8, but they all have to be like a smaller size. And then they just share like a courtyard together and, was it, I think it was Dawn that was talking about, she knew of a cottage cluster development up in Forest Grove that just sort of organically turned into this one little lady moved in. She had lost her husband, and then over the years, all of her friends moved in. And so it was like this little old lady collective that just naturally happened, which was cute. But yeah, no. So for you guys, I think focusing on housing for this grant would be the most, I think it would be the best use of the funds. If you're requesting, I think you're great on environmental protections. I think the procedures in this ordinance are really clear about who does what and when and how, and down to like the language that's on your notices. So I think just getting up to date on state statute would be a really good use.
Are you prepared to put a proposal together to work towards that and then implement it? Is that something that staff could provide direction to do, or are you looking for a recommendation from this council to move forward with that, or how can we assist?
So, I think how you could assist, would be, we do need to have, if this council is willing to sort of move forward, because you guys are going to be the ones that would be integral in like helping, right? You would essentially be,
Sound board.
yes. But it would be you as well as other members of the community that you kind of wanted to bring in who either work here or live here or are voices that you think need to be heard as well. And so I feel like if the commission could put together, we could put together a letter of support and then bring it to council. Because council ultimately is the one that needs to provide their sign off that then goes into the grant packet. So if you are open to me drafting language and that sort of a letter, I can do that for us to discuss and then kind of bring it to council together.
Timing wise, is that something that it sounds like it probably needs to happen more expeditiously? So perhaps when is the city council proposed to review the FEMA language?
23rd.
The 23rd, at their meeting on the 23rd?
Yeah.
Okay. Would this council be open to perhaps having me review a letter that's drafted by Jamie and moving forward with recommendation to the city council?
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
I was wondering, could you draft a letter and then we could just email it out and say yes or no? Sounds great. Does that work?
I can do that.
Are we, so with regards to public meeting law and emails. Is that something that you could perhaps provide some guidance on?
Well, Jamie could send it to me, I can send it out,
Mhm.
but you guys can't reply all and talk to each other about it.
Yeah, that's good.
That's what you can't do.
Oh, okay.
So,
You know, you could email Jamie and say, if you had a question or whatever, you could email Jamie, do you have a question? You can't reply all and everybody's discussing.
does that make sense?
That
sounds great.
And you would send it out and we would reply to you, yes, I approve this letter, blah, blah, blah. Or, that's it.
Yeah, just don't reply all.
Yeah.
Thank you for that clarification, Kat.
Yeah.
I
You
mean,
put
that
that on
sounds
the email.
lovely.
Yeah, and do not reply all.
Do not reply all.
Yeah.
So. If our meeting is on the 23rd, could I get a draft letter to you guys by, say, Tuesday of next week?
Yes, please.
Tuesday, yeah. Okay, and that's the 18th.
Tuesday, the 17th.
17th,
17.
thank you. Yeah, and if you think of anything, well, are they allowed to email? They can email me.
They should not because
Yeah.
you cost us. Let's see, you're an expense to the city.
Yeah.
So,
They emailed you and
yeah, you would send me the letter, I could send it to them. They need to respond to me, I can, put everything together and
Yeah,
like if anybody had questions or whatever, then I can ship that over to you.
okay, that
Okay.
works. So then I guess for that then,
Yeah, that's the better way to do it, yeah.
if you do have other things that maybe you haven't seen that are working really well within your code that have come before you guys, and you wanna include that in addition to housing, we can definitely, doesn't necessarily have to be part of the letter or part of the grant proposal, but it's something that we can focus on. I know with Morrow, we ended up creating an entirely new zoning district. They had a lot of public buildings that were taking up residential and commercial lands. And so let's get into its new thing, so we wrote a new zone for that, that was not expected. And updated the map.
Well, in the planning commission. Couple years ago, maybe a year ago. They had because council had directed planning commission to work on specific things, and so the planning commission actually did come up with a list at that time of things that they would like to see in the code. So we could provide that too.
oh, good.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I can let you guys see that list and you could add to it or whatever.
So timing wise, if Kathy, if you intend to share the list, then perhaps we can look at that tomorrow. You're out tomorrow, Monday, Tuesday.
I will
right?
try.
Because we're down to the wire.
Yeah.
So let's look at that on Monday, so everyone will be intentional about looking at the list, if there's anything to add, we'll provide feedback on Monday. Make sure that you have what you need by the end of the day on Monday, Jamie, and then if it comes perhaps just even as an addendum of a list of things that might be. Items to work on.
Yeah.
Before that. And then are you proposing to function as the implementer as well? You're going to continue to be our person to help work through all this.
Yeah, I'd love to. This is right up my alley.
Okay.
But yeah, definitely putting the grant together for you guys is something that I've done before for other communities and been successful at. And then doing the grant work itself. Especially when it's spaced over. I think. One of the best ways to ensure that things actually go through and get adopted is to have that public engagement and those conversations continuously and for a period of time, because if you have these conversations real quick and then people forget about it a year later and all of a sudden get a notice for adoption, they're like, so having that sort of where you're staying within like the public's, you know, in the back of their head and really nailing down what your community wants. And maybe you don't want cottage clusters, maybe that's something that doesn't work for,
It's in our code currently.
oh, well, there we go. You could take it out, no. But, yeah. Really, getting more input is what helps, and then, this kind of work is definitely manageable over that 18-month sort of period where we're kind of talking back and forth, so. Yeah,
Another point of clarification, so I understand that with Tennyson, as far as county or city planning, we have for consulting or contracting with Tennyson, right? So Dan, you've been our person, but you're officially retiring, correct? That's
I am
what we're
soon,
celebrating, so, okay,
And actually, you're contracting with AKS.
AKS, okay,
And
Formally.
I think, I'm not privy to the high councils now, but when I was told that when they merged in 23, it would be Tennyson and AKS company. And I think that ends on June 30. I think there'll be an AKS of the Dalles or something like that after that.
gotcha.
I think Tennyson is going to be no longer.
Okay, okay. And then Jamie, you will step into function as the city's go-to planner. Are you still available? Is there still a weekly availability here as far as, what does it look like with regards to public outreach and public contact or public accessibility to you?
so right now we have, I do have the planning at City of Cascade Locks, that email, and I've been working with Kathy, on a couple different things. So Dan has really been, it's been more me, than it has Mr. Meter. But I'll continue to function, as I have been, and then, moving, if this, contract, if the city decides to go after this grant and, receives funding for their grant, then my time and effort working on the grant would come out of the grant. Yeah, so it would be funded through them.
Perfect.
And DLCD, I think the match, and I'll have to double look at this or double check, is around 12%. It's either it's between like 12 and 15% that they're asking cities to basically, you know, pony up for. So I know in Arlington it was $5,000 and they got a $45,000 like match. And a part of that match can also be, I think they call it contribution in kind, so your time. For creating, you know, any sort of agendas or doing the coordinating, or IT's time for like, you know, updating the website and whatnot. So those in-kind or in-kind, am I using the language right?
Yes, it's in.
Yeah. So that can also be a part of it too, but yeah, my time on this would come out of grant funds.
Perfect. Any other questions or discussion?
Sounds great. I really think we need to look at our codes and everything. I mean, I don't know if everything needs to be looked at, but it's been quite a few years since everything got looked at. Right?
Well,
Big Larry.
2022, 23, somewhere in that neighborhood, we had a grant. And they went through the code at that time.
Oh, okay.
But
Well, then you're already happy with it, and you can just run it for implementation.
and housing is different, creative housing, I don't know what you want to call it, is definitely a topic for some of our counselors, so.
Sure. It should be for all.
And given that this is a 2-year grant, this could be something that if the city council provides direction to this body, we could continue to move forward with this every 2 years and pursue a grant, providing new projects that would be eligible to present.
Theoretically, yes.
Okay.
But the way that they, the funding that comes from the state and how it's assigned by region, they also look at has the need for that too. And so, if but it all depends on who applies, right? I know Ben keeps on getting them, but you know, Ben is the largest city that's in
Yeah.
your region right now. I think Klamath Falls had one for updating their code, and then the next year they had one for updating their public facilities plans and integrating them into one another. So I wouldn't necessarily write it off the books, but yeah,
Looking at things non-feasibly, there might be an opportunity.
yes.
Okay. Yeah. Any other questions or comments?
Thank you, Kathy,
Thank you.
for dessert
Mhm.
or dinner.
You're welcome. Let's hope you have something a little more substantial for dinner.
Any public comments or discussing things casually now? Nothing official? Okay, I move to adjourn. 7:18.
Thank you very much for
You're welcome.
tonight. This has been very, very, very nice. Appreciate it.